Here are the fights I think need to be made after the UFC White House event last night, and we'll start in the main event. This one to me is really easy. Is Justin Gaethje going to retire, or is he not going to retire? I personally think he should retire. You're not going to have a bigger moment than he had last night, defeating Ilia Topuria as a big underdog, winning the undisputed title. It's not going to get much better than that. I think it would be great if Gaethje just retired. I think he could still compete against these guys. Obviously, he got the big one over Topuria, but I honestly think Gaethje should retire. Now, if he does retire, then I think the move there is Arman and Charles doing the rematch for the vacant title. That makes the most sense. Now, if Gaethje wants to stick around, then it's got to be Gaethje and Arman. I've heard some people talk about Oliveira, and yes, that win over Max Holloway was amazing, but Arman has a win over Charles. Arman should be next. I know the fight with Charles was close. Arman's been waiting around long enough. And I don't know about you guys, but look, I think it's great that Arman's been keeping active fighting for RAF, but Arman's in his prime right now, and I don't really have a lot of interest anymore seeing him grapple Mokaev or wrestling Faber or Tony Ferguson. Like, he's got the fight coming up here with Colby Covington on July 18th. Like, he should be fighting in the UFC. He's in the prime of his career right now. It is a shame we have not seen him fight since the Oliveira fight as far as an actual MMA fight. Sorry, Dan Hooker back in November. I always forget. But yeah. We definitely need to see Arman in there. I've heard some people talk about Topuria getting an immediate rematch. Absolutely not. Topuria, the way he lost this fight, should not be getting a rematch here. I think Topuria needs to go back to the drawing board. I do have a fight for Topuria in mind, and I'll tell it to you right now. And the fight for me for Ilia Topuria is Paddy Pimblett. And I know you're going to say, James, Paddy Pimblett's fighting Benoit Saint-Denis. Yes, he is. But I think if Paddy loses that fight, I think that Paddy and Ilia Topuria makes a ton of sense here. Two big names in the weight class. We'll see what happens. Now, if Paddy wins, then obviously that makes things a little bit different. However, even the winner of Benoit Saint-Denis and Paddy, they're probably going to have to wait a bit as they're figuring out what's going on with the division. In my opinion, you got Benoit Saint-Denis and Paddy fighting each other at UFC 329, but you've got Oliveira and you've got Arman that, in my opinion, are ahead of both of those fighters. So even if Paddy wins, I think you could still make a case of doing him and Topuria next. You could also maybe do Benoit Saint-Denis, but I think Paddy Pimblett is an obvious fight here. We know they've had history in the past. I think win or lose, Paddy Pimblett's got to be next for Ilia Topuria. And again, with Paddy fighting, in a couple weeks here, I think Topuria's going to need some time off, but that's a fight I think you cash in on because it may never happen in the UFC. And I think you got to cash in on that. Look, we're not going to get Islam and Ilia, I don't think ever. This is, still a very big fight here that you could put together. Okay, co-main event. Cyril Gane, pretty obvious. He should be fighting Aspinall if Aspinall's cleared to go. If Aspinall's not cleared to go, then Cyril Gane should fight either Volkov or Pavlovich. Obviously, he fought Volkov more recently. Probably going to be Pavlovich if Aspinall's not ready to go, right? That's a fresh matchup. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that fight. I saw some people talk about Josh Holkett getting the title shot. I'm sorry, but I think that win for Holkett spoke more about how much of a decline Derek Lewis is on as opposed to Holkett, winning the fight. I think Holkett's a great talent and he's exciting for the division and it's nice to see some new blood in here. But I have another fight for Josh Holkett in mind, and that is the man who lost on Saturday, and that's Alex Pereira. Now, I know some people have mentioned about Pereira potentially moving back down to 205. I don't think that's the move. I don't think there's a lot of big fights for Pereira in that weight class. I know there's some that want to see the trilogy with Ankalaev. Carlos Ulberg's a fresh matchup, but I think Pereira should stay at heavyweight. I know he didn't have a good performance against Gane, but I think they're, despite how bad Pereira looked, I think there are winnable fights for him at heavyweight. And I think why not cash in on Josh Holkett at this point, right? Holkett has certainly made a name for himself after a couple of UFC fights. They've obviously had a back and forth. There's kind of that built-in storyline. Can Pereira get some redemption and take out a guy who's been kind of annoying towards him and Josh Holkett? I think that makes a lot of sense here. Again, I think for Pereira, lose a bit more weight for heavyweight, compete in the weight class. I just think if you're 251, why are you killing yourself to get down to 205? I don't think moving down to 205 is the move. He's already won the belt there. I think if Pereira gets a win or two, he could be right back in title contention here. And I think going against Josh Holkett is one of the more notable fights you could put together. I know some people have mentioned Holkett maybe fighting like Volkov or Pavlovich. I would rather see them put two big names together. And let's be honest here. I know Pereira signed that new contract that's going to last a while, but he's going to be 39 in July in a couple weeks here. How much longer are you going to get out of Pereira? I'm saying maybe 4 fights max. One of those fights should be Josh Holkett. I think that's a really obvious fight here. And I think it's a good test for both because Pereira did not look good against Gane. I think as good as Holkett looked against Blades, he wasn't able to finish him. And then he fights a subpar opponent here in Derek Lewis. I think it's a good test for both guys. And I think the UFC needs to cash in on that. So I like Pereira and Holkett. I like Gane and Aspinall. And if it's not Gane and Aspinall, then Gane and Pavlovich. What do you do with Sean O'Malley named as a hobby? I think with O'Malley, you make him wait for the title, the winner of Merab and Yan. I think that's the right move there. If they want to slide him in for Merab, I don't think that's the worst thing either because Merab had a very busy 2025. Maybe you give him some time off. But I just don't think it's in the cards of O'Malley fighting like a Sandhagen or an Umar or anything like that. I think that ship sailed. I think if you're the UFC, take advantage of this big win for O'Malley on the White House card and put him, in the title contention. I know people don't want to see him fight for a title again, but you got to look at it from a business standpoint. O'Malley stock, rose a lot on that White House card. I think title shot or wait for the title shot next would be the move here. Ayman's a hobby. The rumor is the UFC is going back to Canada in October. You probably put him on that card. I think there's a lot of different options you could do as far as who he fights on that event. Peyton Talbot needs an opponent. That could make some sense there. Again, I think for Zahabi, it's about building other guys off of him. You could also do, I guess the rumor right now is Song and Umar now, although I don't know what's going on with David Martinez. I just think you or you do Raul Rosas and Ayman Zahabi as well. I think the way you use Ayman, because he's an older fighter in the division, you use other guys to build him up. I think Ayman against like a prospect like a Talbot or a Raul Rosas, I think makes a lot of sense there. So that would make sense here. I already mentioned Hokit. Derek Lewis should retire. I don't think there should be another fight for him there. Roofy's an interesting one. I mentioned Dan Hooker on my stream last night. I think that could be a fun fight, although I do think Roofy does win that one. Hoofy, as they say on the broadcast. Just looking at the lightweight division right now, you could also potentially do, him and Holloway if Holloway decides to move back down. I think the fight for Holloway with McGregor is just a one-off at 170. I don't think Holloway's going to stay there. I think he's going to come back down. Would not mind at all a Holloway and Hoofy fight. Or Gamrot would be okay too, or Dan Hooker. But I'll go with Holloway as my number one choice. I think that makes a lot of sense with Hoofy. Bo Nickel, feel very strongly about this fight. And you guys let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree. To me, it's Israel Adesanya. Now, I've heard some people mention, it's too much of a step up and, Nickel might not be able to pass this test. I'm not interested in Bo Nickel fighting unranked guys and finishing them. That's what he's had the last two fights. He beat Dawkins and he beat Rodolfo Vieira. Let's get him back in the rankings. Looking at the rankings now, honestly, and this is kind of my argument as to why you should fight Izzy. And I know Izzy's ranked 9, not that far behind DeRitter, who just destroyed Bo Nickel last year. But is there a big difference here between Adesanya, Gregory Rodriguez, and Roman Dolidze? I don't think so. You shouldn't fight Ikram. Then you're kind of killing off two prospects. Ikram also has a fight coming up, right? If I'm not mistaken. I think Ikram's fighting, who's he fighting here? Bruno Ferreira. So he's booked anyways. But I think you do Adesanya. And I think it's the best of both worlds here. If Adesanya can beat Nickel, he gets back on the winning track, right? I don't think people realize that Adesanya's lost 4 in a row. So, the Pyfer fight was supposed to be a fight that he won and got back on track. That didn't happen. He gets finished in the Pyfer fight. I think it's a good test for both. Has Bo improved since the DeRitter fight? It's hard to say because, again, the opposition hasn't been great. You give him a guy like Adesanya, how much does he have left? I think that makes sense. For Adesanya, you go out there and beat Bo Nickel. That's an up-and-coming guy that, people have high hopes for. I think it's a win-win. You just can't make that many big fights in the middleweight division right now. You look at some of the names here. A lot of these names that we're looking at here, they don't scream like big name, fight. And I think with Adesanya being a former champion, someone that was one of the most popular fighters in the UFC, I think you cash in on that. You do Nickel, Adesanya, not to mention the style matchup with Nickel's wrestling. Adesanya, DDP was able to get Izzy to the ground. Could Nickel do that against Adesanya? I think that's an easy fight to make. Kyle Dawkins, I don't know what they do with him here. Obviously disappointing loss. Probably an unranked guy, maybe like a, I don't even know who's coming to mind, like a Cody Brundage or someone like that. I don't know, like someone that's like, exciting, that's not in the ranking, someone like that. Maybe an Eric McConaughey, someone like that. I don't know. I'm just kind of spitting off names right now, so I don't think it matters. Diego Lopez is an interesting one. We'll kind of end on this. Is he going to go to lightweight or is he not? If he's not going to lightweight, I think you do him and Aljamain Sterling. We know that the UFC doesn't seem to be too keen on giving Aljamain Sterling a title shot. Why not give Aljamain another up-and-comer, so to speak? I guess Lopez isn't really an up-and-comer. He's fought for the title twice, but you kind of get my idea. He's not like one of the older fighters in the division. I think a Lopez-Sterling fight makes a lot of sense. Or do they cash in on that Yair Rodriguez fight? Do that fight in Mexico? That could be great too. But I think Diego Lopez probably beats Yair Rodriguez with Sterling. I think that's a tougher test for sure. And for Steve Garcia to kind of finish things off, give me another striker in the division, maybe like a, I don't know. I think it's probably got to be someone ranked at this point with Garcia, right? Because I feel like he did have a nice win streak heading into this fight. Do you do him and, I'm just looking here. He beat Onama. Melky Costa, is that the fight? I think, or did they fight already? I'm trying to remember. Yeah, he did. He beat him back in 2023. So maybe not Costa. You know what? Let's have some fun here. Let's do him and Aaron Pico. That could make sense, right? Pico's number 12. Steve Garcia is ahead of him. Do they risk giving him Pico, though, with his chin issues? That's the other thing. It's tough to say. Or do we do two guys that were on similar win streaks that recently lost to veterans? Well, not veterans, but lost in their step up. Do we finally do Yusuf Zalal and Steve Garcia? That might be the fight too, but I'll stick with Pico because I think Pico needs to pass like the power puncher test here. So I think Garcia and Pico could be the good fight to make. So yeah, just to go over this quickly. Again, some of the fights I want to see happen next. Like I said, Topuria and Patty, Gaethje retirement or Arman, Cyril Gane and Aspinall or Pavlovich, Pereira and Hokett, O'Malley title shot or wait around, Sahabi and an up-and-comer, Lewis retirement, Rufi, Hooker, Gamrot. Chandler should retire. Sorry, I forgot to mention about him. Nickel and Adesanya, big time. Dawkins, an unranked guy. Lopez fighting, Sterling or Yair Rodriguez. Or if he goes up to 55, that's another one. You do him and Dan Hooker. That could make sense too. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. What do you want to see for the winners and losers of UFC Freedom 250? We'd love to hear from you guys in the comments. Let's have a fun discussion about this. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @Lynch on Sports. My name is James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.